What do you think would surprise your grandfather if you could have a look at it, what the vineyard is today? Would it be the varietal mix or how you manage it, or what would surprise him most?
Dad's still pruning at 80. That would probably surprise him. For Grandpa, it'd probably be some of the ground that, there was ground there that we never planted. You can't plant grapes on there.
Yeah.
And now we've got grapes on there. You didn't go past this, because it won't grow because of this or this.
Today our guests are brother and sister duo Brad Case and Nicole Clark from Langhorne Creek. Brad and Nicole are fifth generation vignerons, but also have plenty of other things going on, including a vineyard contracting business, their Kimbolton Wines wine label, an incredible cellar door with one of the best views in the state. Brad and Nicole shared some great insight on how they're managing the family business without killing each other, not always easy, and how they started their relationship with the Montepulciano variety that they both love. You'll find all their details, including how to get your hands on some of that Monty, in the show notes.
Welcome to Healthy Minds, Healthy Vines, the wellbeing podcast for growers, proudly brought to you by the Wine Grape Council of South Australia, sponsored by Perza. Hosted by
journalist and award-winning mental health podcaster Callum McPherson,
and columnist for The Australian and the World of Fine Wine and Australia's leading wine writer when sold by the kilo, Nick Ryan. Let's crush this.
So you got quite the family history at Langhorne Creek. Where did it all begin?
Where did it all begin? We are fifth generation, so from my grandmother's side. So Frank Potts the first started Bleasdale, who was my great-great-grandfather. My great-grandfather was Frank Potts the second. Then there was my nana, Thelma. She married my grandfather Henry Case, and they ended up purchasing part of the Bleasdale estate back in the mid-40s. So my brother and I, Brad, we are now fifth generation. It was passed on to my father, and now we are running the family business.
And what sets Langhorne Creek apart from everywhere else in the world, in your view?
It's a unique town in the sense that it can't really expand a lot because we have floods down there. So there's not a lot of area for Langhorne Creek to expand. So it's very tightly held, especially the original floodplain country, which was probably in the vicinity of about 400 to 500 hectares before obviously pipelines came in and the boom happened, and now there's areas that only ever grew crops and now got vineyards all over them. But yeah, it's quite a family run, like we joke about it, but then there's the Pottses, the Cleggetts, the Folletts, quite a lineage of history, and a lot of them are related. Like many other grape growing regions, we do some things amazingly well. Some things, just okay. But yeah, I think it's quite a tightly held area of a lot of families with a long lineage of history there.
I reckon there's probably a lot of people out there listening to this now from other regions that would be kind of fascinated about the floodplains of Langhorne Creek and the way that works in terms of management of those vineyards. Just want to give everyone a little sort of floodplain vineyard management 101.
The Bremer River, obviously, the more rain, we don't get a lot of high rainfall in Langhorne Creek, so generally it's when it rains in the Bremer catchment area, and obviously that's up at Mount Barker, and we've seen a lot of changes in that over the years due to obviously a lot more dams going in, so that's restricted water, so flooding has become less, but at the same time it's now probably becoming, it's changed again since all the developments happening in Mount Barker. There's water's running off, instead of soaking into hillsides and everything, it's running off quicker. And so all that good soil and nutrients ends up in the Bremer River and runs down, and the creek gets smaller as it gets down towards Lake Alexandrina. And obviously as it gets smaller, so the larger flows means it floods, and so it pushes back out on the northern side of the township. And depending on how big the flood is, the traditional floodplain are alluvial, deep, rich soils, which all the vines are planted on. That's how they lived. So it sort of starts up, I suppose, as far as sort of Dick Cleggett's or Mark Cleggett's Glenavon nurseries up there, and then spreads out and it expands out in real big floods. You see 1 in 100 sort of year flood. But yeah, and it obviously goes out to the vineyard and it sits there, and if you drive through the creek and think, what's that bank for, or why is that bank high there and low there? It's where the water sits, and that creates, that was the form of water back in the days, and that was the only water it got was from the Bremer River. Underground water there was a bit, but not the greatest of quality. But now we get water obviously out of Lake Alexandrina, and even to the point we got a pipeline over to Jervois for the area now, which not only feeds Langhorne Creek but even goes down as far as Finnis and Currency Creek.
It is amazing that a lot of that banking and stuff that's been there for a long time, still works when it needs to.
100%.
As, you know,
I think
those old
what's
guys.
also unique about Langhorne Creek is that, there's basically three sources of water that we can access. One is your natural flooding, where you can't stop it whether you want to or not.
Yep.
We do have the right to take water out of the Bremer River. So there's, Bleasdale can put in the weir, the Follets or the Wenzel families quite often, we always talk about the two sides to the river. They sort of have a lower side, so they're able to access water where, we're more in the township. We sometimes, you need a real full creek for us to be able to access water ourselves. So, we do have the flood boards. We can pull the boards out of the creek and fill the vineyard up. We can hold it, and then we can actually, release it from our vineyard and send it on to the neighbour. So it's quite a unique irrigation system. But I think what happened was in the early 90s, we got access to the River Murray system, and that was initially via Lake Alexandrina. So that saw the region grow from 400 hectares to around 6,000 hectares in about a 5-6 year period.
Yeah.
So that's really what put Langhorne Creek, I suppose, on the map from the point that we just grew so quickly. And we've basically been drought-proofed by having access to that water. So,
yeah, and you would be in a pretty different position now without that if you were relying still on traditional flows, like you're saying, with Mount Barker and the fastest, urban development in the state, which is a little way away, but it has massive impact on what happens in Langhorne Creek. And then you would be in a position that you can't really influence a lot of that.
No. And there would have been quite a number of years if we didn't have access to, the River Murray system, Langhorne Creek sort of through those late 90s to, mid 2000s, the floodplain really did suffer. We we saw those old vines, their root zone is so far down and so far across rows. Whilst you can drip irrigate, they still do love a flood, which sometimes can be quite challenging. You can look at floods both ways. It can have a negative aspect because you don't have control over canopy and, but those old girls, I call them girls. They, you almost have to sacrifice the season almost, if you do have that flooding because, you tend to lose your ability for the quality. You lose control over your canopy and the tons that you grow because of the fact that, they love it. They just, it's party time. So, and I think different growers have taken, different directions.
Even on our own property, we got blocks that water sits in. And we've got blocks that the water, so when it floods, you'll get a foot of water over the whole lot, sinks in, and that's, doesn't get the soaking that, say, where the water ends up sitting and you held it and I'm a big believer that the blocks that have a flood water over them really don't perform until 18 months' time.
Right.
They've got really good waters there. Maybe in the first season you get bigger berries and a bit more vigour and maybe there's a bit of risk. And it depends on the season. If you end up with a hot season, August, September flood, on, a couple of our blocks, really, gives serious good quality for the next 2 or 3 years. And that's where we get some of our best fruit from, to be honest.
So actually welcoming the floods.
Yeah, definitely. It's back in the day and flood time, it was, kids were in boats and canoes going up the main street of Langhorne Creek. It's sort of quite a unique place to come when it is flooded, albeit you got to be careful because there's a few points that if you go through in a car, you won't get out. At 92, I think a fire truck disappeared, in the real big floods of 92, sort of went and drove an aisle and that was the end of it. Dad drove, he was the last one in the 92 floods. Him and I were away in Melbourne and his mum rang up and said, it's still raining, Len, and he's like, geez, if I'm not careful, we'll get a floodie. And I think it was like the 12th of December or something stupid. So anyway, mum rang Dad and said, you need to get back. So Dad jumped on a plane, came back and our cousin went and picked him up in our tractor and he went through the flood water and it was about 6 inches below the cab. And he said, geez, Len, it's nearly in the, it's just below the cab. And by the time he picked him up, this is up near where Bremerton are on the Strathflower Creek Road. And by the time he came back in, it was coming in the cab. That's how quickly it was rising. So, and that, that's probably 1.5 metres there. So we are, once those floods happen, we can be really isolated, in terms of getting in and out of the area.
Nick, what's been the family philosophy?
I think the fact it is family. Both my brother and I, we love what we do. We work hard.
And hate it.
It's a love-hate relationship. We work hard. We work long days. But I think it's, our parents have passed on, and our grandparents passed on to my parents and, a great business. But I think we've all had to leave our mark. It's interesting, I think when Dad took over from Grandpa, the property was only 20 hectares, roughly.
24 hectares. It was 24? Even smaller than that. It was. We had, Doradillas and Palomino and Grenache and Mataro and some really old vines.
Yeah, but all fortified material.
Yes.
And, all massive croppers. We were shifting stuff with sprinklers like that. Back then it was like you sprinkled in winter. That was because we didn't have drip irrigation. And saying that, Dad was and Grandpa, they were the first people to put drip irrigation in Langhorne Creek. And, people there, I won't mention names, going, oh, you're mad. What are you doing that for? Well, there's not a vineyard that goes in now without, drip irrigation. That's the livelihood. But, that's...
Yeah, so sort of Dad made his mark, when he sort of took over and he's expanded. Oh, and obviously with our help, like Brad's pretty much came home after school. He was a runner and had a few years spending time, concentrating on his athletics and went away for World Juniors and bits and pieces, but he would come home when he was needed to help out in the vineyard. And I think with our help, we've all, they grew the vineyard to 55 hectares of what it is today. Brad's been quite instrumental in the fact of, bringing in those alternate varieties. We were one of the first few in Australia back in 2006 to graft some Monty over in Langhorne Creek, which has done really well for us. And now, we're looking, we've opened up the cellar door and we're, expanding our wine range. So I think, the family philosophy is we all want to leave our mark.
Yeah.
But it's always about family.
Building on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
What do you think would surprise your grandfather if you could have a look at it, what the vineyard is today? Would it be the varietal mix or how you manage it, or what would surprise him most?
Dad's still pruning at 80. That would probably surprise him. I think he's done you said he's done 65 years of pruning.
Mm.
So, you're lucky to get an Aussie that wants to come out and prune a vine. That just shows you where the whole industry's changed. Dad, he'd start pruning on the 1st of June and they'd finish in August. And, he used to lay there with his hand hanging out the side of the bed because it ached all night, with the hand snips.
Yeah, yep.
And now, unless they've got electric snips, they won't even rock up. And so it really is a changing sort of thing. But, look, I think for Grandpa, it'd probably be some of the ground that, there was ground there that we never planted. You can't plant grapes on there.
Yeah.
And now we've got grapes on there. You didn't go past this, because it won't grow because of this or this. But now with nutrition and modern advances in technology and water usage and not only that, monitoring and control.
Those barriers that used to be there.
Once upon a time, you can't pump out of the ground and get water up there. It's too salty. Whereas now you're putting on great water, with really good quality. With a pump that we don't even own. It's in the pipeline for the whole area that's pushing water where we need it to go. I think those sorts of things are pretty amazing that as a region you all sit down and get together and that's one of the great things about Langhorne Creek, when the whole region went, we're not just on our own, we're as a group, it does come together and go, right, we need a community pipeline and to the point that, one family missed out because they forgot to put in for it and they're like, well, you can't get in. And then Dad was one, and I can't remember, there's a couple others that all went, well, look, we'll give 10, 15% back because we probably put in more than we needed to let that other family get, and that meant that another, family in the region now gets the same benefits that we get. So they had to pay for it. We didn't pay for it for them. I got that.
What was the expectation growing up in terms of who was going to take over in the end?
My mum and dad's expectations were obviously I was coming home, which, that's quite traditional as in a small family, which I probably got home and I still remember, going home, finished school, year 12, came back on Sunday and then Dad was in there at 7 a.m. going, you got 29 minutes to be out at work. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
This starts now.
So
this is the rest of your life.
Yeah, so, they say year 12 gets you ready for the rest of your life, but, I wish it was, I could start at 9, finish at 3:15 and have, an hour lunch and a 3 hours an hour recess and spend 6 hours with my mates. Yeah,
no gap years for you.
No, there wasn't. So, and it took me, I probably got to 19 and then one day Dad came out and said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to live in town. said, what? I said, oh. So I packed my car and chucked all my stuff in there and said, we had someone working with us, and I said, I just need to get away and spread my wings. And so, I did athletics and went down to town, and Mum and Dad supported me. I'd come home at key times and help and with harvest and all that sort of stuff. I love the harvest. The harvest is great. It's the fruits of 12 months of hard work. But I went down there and worked retail at a place called Rowan Jarman, for anyone old enough to remember that. Yeah. Did my dues there, and that was the greatest thing I ever did, because I learnt to work with people, and there's different types of people out there, and you're sort of working for someone else, and it really allowed me to grow as someone who now has their own business. To go, I remember what I didn't like about working for someone and what they did, so I'd sort of try and make sure that I don't do what they did, which I think does help me with employing people. And
what made you decide to go back?
Well, what happened is I did athletics, and then unlike playing footy where you can earn $300,000 a year, and with a individual sport like I did, I worked out the harder I put in, the better my results. So look, I went down there and I went, well, I'm not going to make a living. I'm not going to retire out of this. You might go to a Commonwealth Games or an Olympics, which is great, but when you're 30 and you want to have kids, you need a house. So the reality came that I need to earn some money more than I was doing. So with everyone planting grapes, I sort of went, I'm going to buy a grape harvester. And then so I bought a grape harvester and went back and, started doing harvest. And I mean, that was because we run a side business as well, which is a contracting company. Look, that's been something that I put a lot of time and effort into. And because our vineyard back then it would have bored me to tears just being there every day. Like, it's like you can't, I've got to be someone that's doing something or thinking about something. So I, came back and started harvesting and had a contracting business with a mate. And then we sort of went our separate ways in 2005. And since then, we've sort of ran our own Brad Case Contracting, which pretty unique name, I know. But
how'd you come up with that?
Yeah, it was sort of funny. When I put my name on, I thought everyone will use it because of me and know what I'm like, but also has my regrets with that now, because then everyone goes, oh, you're Brad, and they want you there, and the business has grown now that it's not just about me. I mean, I'm running the business, but it could run without me now. We've got some really key guys in there. So,
yeah, but no one expects John Deere to turn up on the tractor. So.
No. Yeah. But yeah, so that's what made me come back. I thought there's an opportunity here, and I had driven grape harvesters for the O'Connors in the early days and loved it when I was at school. I'd come home and, as soon as I get home from school, I'd chuck my gear on and straight out on the back of a grape harvester with a bloke called Kevin Driver, who now comes and helps us with vintage. And, that was going back some 30 years now. It's sort of funny how it all turns.
Full circle.
Yeah.
Nicole, you're in finance. You should have known better.
No, I had a baby and I didn't want to go back to work. Yeah, so I think for me, as Brad said, it was always expected he would come home on the farm, but I think I was supposed to find my Prince Charming, get on that white horse and ride
someone else's problem.
Right away and basically provide the grandchildren. Yeah, as I said, I had a baby, but around that time, the GST was brought in, and, the old shoebox accounting system didn't work anymore. So Mum, things got a little bit trickier, I suppose. So having an accounting system online, and so I sort of started getting involved in that way. And then we sort of started looking at sustainable viticulture and Ent wine and all of those types of things. So yeah, Dad and Brad didn't really want to do the admin side of it as much as we were doing they were doing all the hard work in the vineyards. I was sort of doing more the admin side of things. So yeah, I became involved, and yeah, I've always been a very family-orientated person. So, yeah, I loved working in the business, and that's how it sort of started.
Is that side of, viticulture and running vineyards become more onerous over time, sort of the back office
100%.
stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, we are the gatekeeper for the ATO, from the financial side of things. But I think now, once upon a time, I look at what Mum and Dad did, and, Dad was always forward thinking, as Brad said. He and Grandpa were the first people to put in, drip irrigation. Dad, once upon a time, was the only person in Langhorne Creek that owned a spray cart. Mum talked about Christmas Day, he just sprayed all the time, like back in the 70s. Like, he lost his smell and taste due to the fact that, there was no such things as lovely cabs on tractors. And, so Dad's always been very forward in his viticultural practices. But there's farming, and now there's farming. You actually have to be more business inclined, I believe. It's becoming, a
And it's
lot
only
more.
going to get more that way.
Precision viticulture is incredible. You need to be able to understand, where your end product is going, what are the inputs that you need to be able to get it there. It's not just a matter of letting the vine now produce what it produces, and you'd have some good years and some not so good years, whereas, the inputs now are just, incredible. So
Does the industry do enough to support growers with that and then, give them the resources they need to be able to manage that sort of workload?
I think the information's out there. It's knowing where to access it and how to access it. But it's also hard. It's depending on, I think our family's really lucky. There's Brad and I, I've just turned 50, he's in his late 40s, we're involved in the family businesses. Like I look, there's a lot of growers in other regions and in Langhorne Creek that, sort of in their 60s, are their children going to come home? What's, how's that looking for them? Like,
children don't want to come home.
Yeah.
But they don't want them to sell it because they want that asset. If I'm honest, they want an asset. Like how Dad's sitting on a, $1 million vineyard. Dad's out there doing the work, and there was a few that has changed. Look, some of those guys have moved on now. A few sold 8 years ago, probably when they shouldn't have. If you had sold 3 years ago, you would have been getting 50% more for your property. Now we're back into this lull again. The industry's hard because we can't, everyone talks about you've got to be, be able to adapt to change and all that. But it is, you can't go, I'm growing Cabernet this year and now next year I'm going to grow Riesling, or, it really is. And the industry, I put it back and go, you look at the old world, and we'll go to France, they grow, there's regions that grow Pinot, there's regions that grow Chardonnay, Champagne, they do it really well. Whereas here, we're the big corporates going out there, mate, just plant 50 hectares of Chardonnay and Riesling. When people put Riesling in Langhorne Creek, I remember Dad laughing, going, idiots, why would you be doing that? Nah, that's what, I think it was Pernod, one of the heap of Riesling and everything. Now, they've still got some Riesling, and it grows some good Riesling, but it gets disease, it gets sunburn, and it's a challenge. Whereas when you're growing your own fruit for your own product, you go, well, we'll rip it off a bit earlier, it doesn't matter, we can deal with it. Whereas when you're a grower, you scrutinise totally differently. Nah, it's not quite right. Nah, we don't want it. Or anyway, I don't think there's too much Riesling left in Langhorne Creek now, but there was probably a good couple of hundred hectares put in. We can't adapt to change. You can't go from growing a wheat crop to canola in 12 months. That's what we can't do. And there's a lot of infrastructure put in, and the cost of putting in a new vineyard now would be somewhere in the vicinity of, $60,000 to $100,000, depending on where you are and what infrastructure you got. It's just, you're not getting the returns anymore. Once upon a time, you had, 1 in 10 years, you'd have 5 average years, 2 really bad ones, a good one and 2 really good ones. You had money in the bank, whereas things are pretty tough now. And if you're just a grower and you're a small grower, it's even harder because, like I said, Nicole can do the book stuff in the back house, but we've also got the cellar door, so she's in there doing the cellar door stuff in the background. She's doing the vineyard stuff. My wife, she does all the book work for the contracting side because that is next level again. Like, different.
There's so much work you don't see other than just the stuff that's front of house.
Yep. So you've got, Anna's there doing accounts and pays, and because the way we work it, all the staff for the vineyard come through my business, and so that's one less issue we have of paying staff and all that, but you've got the cellar door. So we're big enough, as I said, to have, we've got the 3 different hats. We're a producer, we're also, an end sales point, for wine with the cellar door, and we're a contracting company, albeit different. So, whereas if you're just a grower, it should be pretty tough.
Yeah.
Well, it is pretty tough. I shouldn't say it should be. We see it. Great rewards when it does well, but, we're going to see some hard times, I think, the next couple of years. And, it's funny how 2 years ago we had wineries down there going, mate, need your fruit and, what can you give us? And, I remember when I helped you out and, a lot of people went, all right, you support, I'll give you that and sell them. But you got to take my Chardonnay if you want my Shiraz. That was all good. Now it's like, well, we want your Chardonnay, we don't want your Shiraz. And you say to them, well, what about oh, mate, it's just the way it is. And to the point that There's some
It's China, it's COVID, it's Ukraine. There's always
the boats, shipping, and look, it is all that. Like, let's not beat around the
No,
bush.
but everyone's always got an excuse to be
Yeah.
able to push back on you.
But I mean, the last ones I've heard is, wineries ringing up going, we can't take your fruit. You've got a 3-year contract. We can't take your fruit. We've got nowhere to put it. We just don't need it. Now, there's a guy that, and in this particular case, I'm doing work for him, putting in another vineyard, believe it or not. And he's like, I got a phone call last week saying, we don't want all your Shiraz. So he said, 4 years ago, that was a $300,000 sale for me. He said, but let's say it's an average sale of 150 grand. I've just walked away from it. So he said, now what do I do with that? And I'm putting in a new vineyard. I've already got my posts. I've ripped it. I've bought my vines. I can't pull out from all that. So we're going to see that flow on, whether you're growing grape, like vines in the nursery, or whether you're selling posts or chemicals, or it's going to hit the region, and it'll take a little bit, but it will spread a lot further.
It's a shakeout that's coming. Do you think that's then a contraction, or, will the current level of plantings be maintained just under sort of different ownership?
I think there will be vineyards that get sold, and there'll be people there. And the ones that will sell first, the ones with high overheads, high costs, maybe got debt or larger debt, and they go, well, I can't afford this, so they'll sell. But then someone might buy that vineyard and then buy it really cheap and come in with less debt. So then the next person that thinks, all right, now is the higher person with debt. So we're going to say the good vineyards will survive because they'll always get sold and go on, but it needs to contract. The reality is we've got too much vineyard out there. There used to be lots of wineries. They all consolidated. One big winery bought another winery. And so now, and then they shut wineries down because we don't need them, because what vineyards go, it's like me with a grape harvester, once upon a time we picked for 12 weeks, and you'd pick 7 days a week with that one harvester. Now, vintage can be 7-8 weeks, and, I need 3 harvesters to do that same work to be able to, because the wineries go, we want all this on the same night.
Yeah.
So it really has changed. We're going to see vineyards sell. We're going to see some get pulled out.
Do you think there's enough respect for growers from the large wine businesses?
No,
Not at all. No, it's tough. And I think the fact that, as Brad just said, like this scenario, you've got contracts, so you think you were safe. It's okay. I don't think the contract, unfortunately, today is worth the paper it's written on. We all need it. You've got a little bit of security with it, but at the end of the day, if they can't pay you, then there's no point in giving them those grapes in the first place. So I think that's something we're going to have to negotiate and work through over the next few years. Yep, you might have a contract, but what does that mean? What are your entitlements? What are the legalities around that? Because
and when push comes to shove, it's not a guarantee still.
No,
and then you can go and see your lawyer, but the other side's got their own in-house legal department and
with more money.
Yeah.
Always the way.
What sticks out as something that you guys have learned from your parents in terms of how they ran things?
Hard work.
Yeah, I was about to say exactly the same thing. Hard work. Yeah.
No job. I mean, I'll go out and do any job. I mean, we've got sort of 16 or 18 people we employ in the contracting side of things, full-time job organising and machinery. We run a lot of gear, and we work from, Clare, Barossa, Adelaide Hills, Langhorne Creek, McLaren Vale. We do go down the southeast as well. So we do spread our wings with contracting, not everything, but some of the services we offer. And we've got a really good team. We've got a viddy and everything like that. But you're not too good. I can go out and staple, wires to posts. I can go out and knock posts. I can go out and, sit on a slasher. I think, hand pruning, when you've got 60 hectares to hand prune, you're not real keen. Doesn't go out there and start because it's pretty long finish. But you're never too good for anything. So I think be prepared to, and it's not a bad thing to know and understand. I started doing, I've done everything. I've done the hand pruning days. I drive the harvesters, and this year I was on the harvesters with COVID. We have a heap of people out during harvest, and I did probably the hardest vintage I've ever done, trying to run it, drive, all those stresses as well. But, you never, Dad still prunes today. He's not doing the volume.
Yeah.
Nick was just saying he's just finished.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that he's 81 years of age, and I cringe because I hope people don't think that we have that expectation that he's out there.
Elder abuse.
You're whipping him.
And it's quite funny. Like every year he quits, but I think this is the first year, I think, for about the last 5 years he hasn't quit and said, I'm never doing it again. Because every year bit like childbirth, I suppose. You forget how bad it was, and he rocks back up and comes out to prune each year. But even in harvest, he rocks up and says, can I escort machines? Or oh, the hand pickers are out there. Like, the day he says that he stops will be the day that he dies. So, but then, my mum's, she was a teacher, but she took a little bit of a backward step, I suppose, in that regard, because, she was always the one there. Like, I don't think Dad's ever made breakfast for himself in his life. He comes home at lunchtime and lunch is on the table. And if she did go teaching, the sandwiches were already made in the fridge. She's been the backbone.
She enabled it.
Enabled him to, not have to worry about those things. Yeah, so I think, their work ethic has been amazing, and I think that's been really good for us to learn from that and see that. And the fact that Brad and I work in the business, like, when COVID hit, I worked pretty much 7 days in cellar door because, we weren't sure when we opened back up on that 1st of June 2020, what was it going to be like? It was scary for my staff. So I took, the vision that, I would work weekends, and, that meant I was supposed to have Thursday, Fridays off, but that didn't happen because, the
never
working
doing
week.
your own business.
No, the working week still happened. And so, we're not scared of hard work.
Is it the kind of work that you feel like you'll be in it till you die as well?
Not.
No. Now, what I love about it is also, I sit there and look at my mum and dad and go, look what they've done. And they use their super to buy another vineyard. And they said, we'll retire off this. And then, things are a little bit tough. And, I sit there and I do believe that, and I probably work, Dad and I quite often have disagreements. What's everyone doing? We've got bloody 18 people. No one's here to come and do this for me. I'm like, Dad, they don't all sit around waiting for you to roll in going, can you come and, slash this block today for us? So it's quite interesting. But then Dad used to prune for 12 weeks straight. Now, I don't know how he did that. That'd do my head in. It just couldn't do it. I need to be thinking of other things. So
12 weeks printing in a headphones era too.
A lot of time to think.
Oh, yeah.
But
and electric snips with the compressor running every day. It was not electric, air snips.
Yeah.
And if you stuck your finger in there, you didn't go, oh, stop before I cut it off. It literally was gone. It was like, that was it. So.
You still got all his fingers?
He has.
Yeah.
He has. Yeah. I don't know that he's ever cut himself.
Yeah, Dudley cut him once. No, I don't want to do that. And look, we talk about next generation, and, I've got a son that's 7 and I've got a daughter that's 11, and they're both going, he comes home and goes, Dad, I want to do what you do, and I'm like, mate, it ain't always like this, and we do well with the contracting side of things, but, as I said, I've been doing it for 20 odd years, and I can tell you now that I didn't take $1 out for the first probably 15. And when I say I didn't take $1 out, yeah, we lived and everything, but I worked at home, and so you just paid off machinery, and if you're smart with it, and, if you always want brand new machinery, you'll never have any money. So you've got to be prepared. We've got mechanics now, and
there's always something new and shiny to catch your eye.
But it doesn't always mean it's better. And so that's what we're always looking at, technology and updating. But to me, it's offering service, good quality service, having good guys. So yeah, I get my son that goes, I want to come home and do that. And, for my daughter, now that's up to them. But even with Nicole's kids are a bit older.
You might have said there's no way knowing they're coming home.
But at one
they
stage,
can see the hours I work.
But at one stage, that you were like, oh, if the kids come home and everything, I'm like, no one comes home without a trade. If worst case scenario, become an electrician or a plumber or do something, and I think
we need them to get.
We've got a paramedic, so it helps me out if anything goes wrong. That's him.
If you're still out there pruning.
And Lockie sounds like he might go down the accountancy line, which
handy.
The reality is it doesn't mean you get out. It might mean that you put a manager in, and if you got your shit in line and know what you're doing, you can have someone come and run your vineyard and pay them, and they do well, and you can still have quite a good asset. No reason why your kids can't come home later if that's what they want to do, but I'm not thinking my kids are coming home.
With the kids, they may be able to go off and get their degrees or trades or what have you, and if they can benefit the business in some way, shape or form, that's great. So they don't have to necessarily work in the business, but they can have support roles. Or I've had Lockie's worked in the cellar door as one of my dish bitches. Tom helps Pop with, getting wine and making sure the cellar door's fully stocked. So, they've had a few little roles, over the years in helping out. So,
What's the hardest thing about getting sort of succession planning in family businesses right? You see a lot of people that don't make it.
I think from my parents' perspective, they were always worried that they were going to upset one of us, because I think their forward planning was Brad took over the business and I was off on my little white horse somewhere. So I think when it got to that point,
Which she was, by the way.
Yeah, I did run away for a little while, and then I just was gravitated back. Langhorne Creek has that bit of a draw sometimes. So I think, and especially when you've got a young family and what have you. But I think their biggest fear was, there was this expectation that Brad was going to inherit the vineyard, and then I came home, and then, the vineyard was not big enough to support 3 families. So, we went into debt. We purchased more vineyards. So the fact that, my husband and I could be involved, mind you, he's kept his day job because, we've needed to do that. It's not lucrative. When you've got your own business, both Brad and I take minimal out of the business. We still support our parents, day to day as well. So we've needed this outside income. Brad's got his contracting business. I remember it quite vividly because I was saying to Brad, we're being screwed over by the banks with interest rates, and after vintage we need to go and see them and, see, what we can do, because, what we were paying was ridiculous. But when you've got 70-year-olds, in charge of a business, you could see where the banks were coming from. So Brad goes, right, what do we need to do? And I said, well, I think we need to sort out how we're going forward and how we're going to do this. So I think for the next 3 hours, we sat there and Brad said, well, it's not going to work if we do it this way, and it's not going to work if we do it that way. And, this just makes sense. And
Mum and Dad had it. How Kimbolton was is the original 20-hectare homestead prop, or where the original vineyard was left to me. And that was, and along the way, that was always, I think when, you got things going, oh, well, our daughter's gone and remarried, so we'll help her with this. And that was probably when there was a bit of money around in the 90s. And it was always, oh, yeah, you come home. And I can see, I see both sides of it, that, if I went home and earned 30 grand a year and just worked on a family property, and then, you've got an opportunity, like the siblings go out and we see it in places where they go out and have a job and do really well and make money, and then go, oh, I still want half the property.
Yeah.
Correct.
How one's grown it. So we bought the second property, and effectively the conversation was, and Mum and Dad didn't know about this. We sat down and, I'm smart enough to go, well, if I kept Kimbolton, and Nicole and I both had what we call our Montrose block, I own all the machinery effectively because I contract with it. We sold off the Kimbolton tractors and used that sort of strategically for what we needed. So I'm like, well, I could run the property, charge Nicole half to run Montrose. Montrose had the debt because that was the latest property we bought. Kimbolton was debt-free if you look at properties. So all of a sudden, Nicole's got to pay half the debt as I do. I'm running it, so I'm making money off running it. It was never going to work. And, I couldn't do what we're doing. Like, I'm not interested in sitting there working out what wet tax we're going to pay and all those sorts of things. So Nicole had I suppose, she does the bookwork side of things, which doesn't interest me. My wife, I said that I didn't want her to come involved in the business, and that's just us. That's the life. That is, she's involved in the contracting side of things and does all the bookwork and everything, but, she was a physio, so we decided at the time, and so Nicole did that, and the only way it was going to work is to go, we just go 50-50 and everything. So we went to Mum and Dad and said, the only way this is going to work with, you've got it as in this is mine and that's ours. Well, it's all ours, and a lot of the wines come off that original block for our label. So it was just, and I said, it's not going to work. And then if Nicole turned around and said, well, stuff you, I'm out. Are you going to buy me out? And I go, well, what do you want? Oh, you want $1 million? Now I've got to go into $1 million worth of debt, and you lose your best asset, who is someone that's actually in the business that cares about it.
Yeah.
You're not worried about fleecing $100 grand a year out the back door that you don't know about.
Yeah. So you had to have that foresight to see what would happen if you went down that road before you did.
It's a great saying. It's, and I've always said this, there's no point sitting up the front end of the plane on your own. I'd prefer to sit out the back with my mates. I mean, I'd prefer to sit up the front with my mates, to be honest. But the reality is it's
or on your own plane.
That's. But I think, if you don't see that, and sometimes you're better off having 50% of something that's great than having nothing of anything. And that's I believe with the industry is if Nicole had sort of checked out and said, "Oh, well, just pay me out and you have it yourself," I'd have a life of misery. I work hard enough as it is. I miss out on so much as it is, with what we do. And so I think, this is something that, and it's I can go away and Nicole's looking after all the cellar door side. Like we've got a Viddy, she can go away and she knows that everything's okay as well. Like we have the foresight to get right people in place. Yeah, it costs us money, but that's what we've worked out.
But you complement each other, and if you both weren't working in it, it wouldn't be what it is.
No, correct. And I cross over during vintage, so I help Brad manage his day-to-day harvest operations. I think I quit every year, don't I?
Yeah. Twice.
Twice, yeah. Once in the middle and once at the end, because you're managing 30 guys and 9 or 10 machines, and
and
as Brad
spread far and wide.
Yeah, across regions, you've got wineries that want to, you can't sort of say, "Oh, yeah, mate, I'll get back to you in 3 days' time." It's you're on call 24/7. So yeah, but it works. It really does work. But I think the fact that we had the foresight, and we stripped everything back. We looked at what each of us could bring to the business, and what it is we can do, and and we wouldn't be as good as what we are without our staff. Our staff are phenomenal. We employ good people. But then I hope to think that they can see the value in what, we give them as employers too, with flexibility, and we like to look after them. We think that they're family. But yeah, and I do remember going to mum and dad saying, Brad and I've sat down, this is where it's at, I just want to make sure you're happy. And the relief on their faces, they said, "Oh, thank God," like they just couldn't see their way out of it. Like our accountant had spoken to them on numerous occasions to try and come up with a plan and assist, and they just didn't want to disappoint either of us.
Did they share that with you, that they'd been stressing out about that for a long time?
My mum burst into tears.
Yeah.
Because they're like, "Oh, we've got debt," and we're like, they've given us such a, in reality, I look at it, and Grandpa founded it, or not founded it, but Nana and Grandpa bought the property off, because Nana's brother owned where we are now, the Kimbolton, that was part of Bleasdale, and he was killed at war. And so his widow was expected to sort of, here it is, and ride off into the sunset. And she said, "No, it doesn't work like that." And then Grandpa was working at Bleasdale and in the spirit side of things. And Nana said, maybe we could, they were together and said, "Let's buy it, So they bought it, and, it was a dairy and had some undesirable, grapes on it. And we used to have Chester Osborne driving around in his blue Porsche back in the days, buying grapes.
Typically low key.
Yeah. Wouldn't have known it was Chester. But I mean, that was, what Grandpa bought. He gave the foundation. Dad grew it. I think it was only about 12 hectares of vineyard. And I still remember him come home one day and he said, "Oh God, I've just bought the 2 blocks at the end of the road. I've paid $11,000 for them. Oh my God." And he was like writing this check out. And I think I was 10 or 11 and he was nervous and he was, geez, what am I going to do? And anyway, we planted rock melons and watermelons on it for 12 months. And I think we paid for it just about, we're mucking around with that as kids. And it's one of our best blocks on the property and grows some of our best fruit. And, that was just how he stressed, So, then we went and bought a property for, $1.5 million many years later. And we had another property which we sold off, had vines on it because we're a shareholder in that, and bought this one, outright ourselves. So we had more control. And so they've, Grandpa bought it, Dad's grown it, and now it's up to us. And I feel like we are, yes, I've put in some alternate varieties and we did that at the toughest time when no one wanted Chardonnay. Everyone just went, "Don't want Chardonnay." And, when you've got 20% of your vineyard to Chardonnay, you're like, well, what are we going to do here? And that was when I said, "Oh, let's put some Monty in." So we did a little block, and, that was all, we did that ourselves. We had to re-knock it. And
I mean, that process of then going, okay, I want to, change the varietal mix in the vineyard or whatever else, it's not as simple as going, I've got an idea. I mean, how does that whole process work? How do you identify what you think's going to work?
No, I think the process was pretty simple, actually. I think it was what you said. I just went, I reckon we should put Monty in. And
I couldn't say it. I was like, what? What are you doing? Like, what is this stuff? Like,
No, that was, and we put in 0.2 of a hectare, and we put in 0.15 of Zin.
Yep. Right.
Didn't get it
good
quite
idea
right.
and one
We're not talking about Zin. We're not talking about Zin. So, I mean, we did that, and I know you look at it and I'm like, we've got all this Chardonnay, what are we going to do? And I mean, my reckoning is if you're not doing something, you got to chat, So we were going, and there's people there that didn't do anything. They said, we'll just mothball the Chardonnay, we'll grow up for a few years. Everyone's saying, oh, Chardonnay's back, but you're still only getting your $600, $800 a tonne. It's hard to make money at that.
Yeah.
Whereas,
it's back at a certain level and a certain kind of Chardonnay from a certain place.
Yeah,
It's not
correct. Well, from
necessarily-
we're talking Langhorne Creek, I suppose, here. Whereas, I look at it and go, we put in Monty, I thought it would work, tasted a few, then went off. And it was Justin Lane, he was from Box and Dice, and he was really passionate. So we did, 1.5 hectares. And, I mean, it was a bit of a, whilst by the time I'm expressing my thoughts, I've normally thought about it a fair bit.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that I look at every, and then I come out with it. Rather than look like an idiot that came up with a silly idea, I prefer myself to work that out. So, and that's what we did. We came up with Monty, and then it was like, we'll make our own wine. Actually, the bloke that bought him the first year couldn't pass for him. So then I took some wine off him, and then we sold it. And that was when Halliday sort of talked about it and said, this is a great wine. And I went, oh, look, what I thought, you got one of Australia's best critics sort of back in the time, this is going back about 2012, 11, and you went, wow, not many people knew about it. And look, we do grow a lot of it and we sell it to a lot of little guys. But geez, it's fun. Going out and picking, 100 tonnes of Shiraz and selling it off to one of the big corporates. You can ask yourself, what do you enjoy better? We hand pick it, we hand prune it, we lift it, shoot thin it, all these different bits and pieces. And geez, when it sits there in a half-ton bin and, you've hand-picked it, coming from someone that owns harvesters, it's pretty enjoyable. That's the passion about it. That's and it's the relationship. It's, it was when Lano and I, and I think you were there that time, and I said to Lano, I said to Lano one day, what do you think of Sparkly Monty? He's like, nah, don't. And I went, oh, okay. And then he rings me up about 3 hours later and goes, I've been thinking about what you're saying, I think it actually, and I said, it's just a bit more savoury, Shiraz is quite sweet and sickly. Look at these old Shiraz, they become more savoury. That was my thoughts, like the old Leasinghams, and which was stunning, old fizz, red fizz. And anyway, so we went, and you bought the Soda Stream, I think, and we thought, this is easy, put wine in there, and Jesus, it just blew up. And I think in the end we did a 700 ml bottle, and I think we had about 50 mils in the bottom of it. Everything wrecked. I think it wrecked his top or wrecked the floor.
No, we did it in my kitchen first.
Oh, was it?
And then we took it over to the winery because
They destroy the kitchen.
Kitchen,
And that's how that came about.
Lano loses a Slayer t-shirt. That's just, he's got 50 others anyway.
No, he still wears it out, mate. It just looks like he's been in the mosh pit longer than he should have been. But I still to this day, Lano's a great guy and a character, and, things didn't quite work out with his luck. But, that label, I still see him in every time I see it. We still supply fruit to him. And even with what we're doing, Lano was just such a passionate, and he still is. But that's just another person you meet on the way, and he gave us the confidence to.
Well, he was a believer. A believer. This is the way to go.
So the next stage of that story is: do you try and find what's the next Monty, or do you just try and evolve and refine?
Well, then we did Fiano.
Yeah.
I went, let's do Fiano, and we did. Once again, I liked Fiano. Yeah, I think if you love something, you're going to be passionate about it, you're going to push it, and that. Was something for me. We still got a lot of Cabernet and Shiraz, which I think are backbones of the vineyard. Whilst we might have some tough times coming up with them, I've got people lining up for Fiano, for Monty. We've done some Carignan. I only put a small amount in. Would I go and that's taken a little bit more to take off. But once again, if I had 50 tonne of Carignan, it might be 40 tonne too much. So, and with the contracting side of things, even this year, a lot of people have. Oh, Fiano. So once we get to a point where Fiano is in a better balance, we're going to see, I need the price to come down.
You're going to need more Carignan, though. Now that the new Rosé Spritz is just about to be launched, I'm thinking that's going to really take off.
All about the Rosé Spritz.
But how does working, across regions, how does that spark inspiration? What are you seeing when you're working in other places that comes back home?
The best thing about that is I see what other people would, you're always learning. It's great that you get to see, geez, I've never seen that done this way. And even layering techniques and pruning techniques that you just go, geez, I've never thought of it that way. Yeah, to the point that, you start bringing some of that stuff home and Dad's like, we've never done it like that. What the hell are you doing? And I'm like, Dad, you don't get to see what I get. So it is interesting. And even varieties, like we're about to put in what started 3 years ago when we're putting in 6 hectares and it was Shiraz. Then we've got all these newer clonal, sort of old clone stuff, which, are proving to be some really good Shiraz, which I've got off mates that own some pretty great vineyards. And, then we went, no, we don't need more Shiraz. That's only going to, we had a contract for it for 8 years. I'm like, that's only going to bring more pain to the industry. So we swapped and changed and looked at it. So we're doing Fiano and Pinot. You might go Pinot, Langhorne Creek. Pinot's an interesting one because I think it's fast becoming more and more popular. Everyone's palate changes, they get a bit older. People like drinking sort of not as heavy wine sometimes, with the way we're sort of having more long lunches and all these things. So Pinot in Tassie's gone through the roof price-wise, and Yarra and all these regions, and even the Hills, is now pushing $3,000 or more $1,000 a tonne for dry. So I think they still need an entry point Pinot from somewhere. So we're doing some of the new clones, 667. We're doing Able and 777. 667's out of New Zealand. You'd know that, Nick. Yeah. But and point of difference, you can grow it for sparkling, you can use it for rosé if you have a tough wet year. So we're experimenting with that. I mean, not experimenting. It's not like we're out of I'd love to get some Acertico. So Peter Barry, if you're listening to this, give us a call.
Driving in the car somewhere, yeah. Don't hold your breath.
I think one of the things that I see with Brad and, working across the regions is the relationships too. It's, meeting different people and, having those connections. Yeah.
How can the industry sort of facilitate that for people who don't have, cross-regional, contracting businesses? Is there enough sharing of knowledge?
I think that it's out there for people to do it. It's just people don't. It's hard to try and tell. I mean, if you sat there and said, Dad's still running his vineyard or paying some young, my 80-year-old dad's not going to drive up to the Barossa and do a wine tasting. He's just not interested. And as you get older, I've got younger kids, and now on a Saturday, I used to go, what wine tasting's on? I used to go to all the wine tastings. Geez, Eastern Cellar's got this one, port tasting, and then you'd buy some, and I ain't got time for that now. I go from netball to footy. If you want to do something yourself, and you've got a social life, and so I think it gets as you get older and you have kids, it does get harder to do that. And I suppose even with what we do, like sometimes I'll be working with something, I've got this, block of, let's say it's Mataro, I can't get rid of it. And I'll go, 3 weeks later, someone might say to me, do you know anyone with Mataro? Hang on, yep, bang. And, even to the point that I've had guys ring up and go, can you pick, David Blows one day in the Adelaide Hills who we picked for, said, Brad, when you're up here, after you pick the Shiraz, can you pick the last, we've got about 10 or 11 tonnes of temp. And this is going back 5-6 years ago. And so I made one phone call and rang up Mike Farmelote and said, Mike, you still interested in some temp? He goes, yeah, what do you got? I said, mate, here's David's number, ring, bang, and he still supplies him temp to this day for that label. And I didn't take anything from it. To me, that's just someone that helps pay my bills here and someone that buys fruit off me. And that's relationship. That's when I ring them up and say, hey, can you help me out here? Or this. People do. And I mean, that's fortunate, but also I look at it and go, I've done a lot for people without putting my hand out, whereas most people are going, what do I get out of it? So,
I don't know what you do, though, to facilitate that. Like it's opening up communications. I think sometimes, it's hard for growers to come out and say that they've got this fruit that's uncontracted, or I don't know what the way is going forward to help with that.
The industry at the moment, though, I mean, the industry's been pretty good and there's more people than ever, especially in Langhorne Creek where, it's not the Barossa where you've been selling to the same person forever and a day and they've gone. So, a lot more people are just off the bat ringing up people and ringing around, and with what we're going to come up with China being an issue, and there's going to be wineries that don't have the space to store wine. So what do? I mean, does that mean that if we've got no storage, it's sort of like, I look at it and go, as a wine, if you've got no storage because you've got 3-year-old wine sitting in tank, get rid of the 3-year-old wine, pour it on the ground. That's you've got to look at your business thing, and if you've got to buy their grapes. Now, I don't know whether they can come to an agreement that don't grow them and we'll pay you a certain amount. I don't know, but whereas if you're if I rang up a winery and said, I don't have enough water to grow my grapes this year and you want my grapes, they go, mate, that's not our problem. Yep. And you've got to go and buy more water to survive. So that's where the industry, and it's unfortunate because it's not like, back in 2004 when they released the 2025 report and said this is where we need to be in 25 years and we were there in 5, and then we're in oversupply. It's not, as growers we got it wrong. As an industry we got it wrong. At the moment, what's affecting us is a political shitstorm. Now, I'm not into politics, which not one grower had his fault. As an industry, we put a lot of eggs into one basket, but, you can argue that if you're getting paid good money to do your job and maybe more than you should be, but you're doing a good job, you don't go, I shouldn't do that. Most people run when they got on a good thing, they like to keep doing it.
Yep.
Now, has the government helped us out? I'm not saying they should, but, it's tough. You could say, let's get rid of the wet tax now, to help out for a period of time. Now, will that help the wine industry? It's not going to help the grower that doesn't sell booze, but maybe it means that a big corporate might buy their fruit instead of not buying their fruit, and it saves them a little bit. And I mean, when we're talking on the pressures now, I think the new tax is coming in. If this new trade agreement goes in the UK, and they're going to tax on alcohol. So all of a sudden, these 14% alcohol Shiraz from Australia are going to put, we're losing one tax, but it's going to actually add the value. So, can we fudge that for the time being? It just feels like, not saying we should get handouts, but it feels like the problems we're facing at the moment is totally out of the control of 90% of the people that it's affecting the most.
Yep.
And that's the sad thing, because we're going to see people go broke. We're going to see people sell vineyards, and you can say, oh, well, look, he grows poor fruit and big tons. But if he's got a 10-year contract, he's actually still going to be doing that. Yep. It's the poor bloke that might have done the right thing his whole life that's just on the wrong time of coming out of contract. And that's I always see that as the tough side of the industry. And the reality is if they go, we only need 1,000 tons and we get 1,000 off him and you grow 100, they're not going to take you 100 unless it's special, real special. That's the real big issues, and we're faced with, fuel pricing, and that's grower. I mean, as a contractor, we got asked, you're going to put a fuel levy on, you're going to put this up, you're going to put that up. I'm like, well, who does that on the bottom end for grapes? And if I'm making extra money and these guys are going broke, they're not around, I'm not going to make money.
Your customers are gone.
So we just came to the conclusion we'll sort of meet halfway, cover a little bit. I mean, for us, that fuel levy was costing us probably in the vicinity of 150 to 200,000 bucks a year for no fault of ours and no fault of our growers. So we're not, wages is a thing, that goes up, and I've got no problem with those sorts of costs. But, from 12 months ago to now, a lot of our spare parts have probably risen 25%. Wages are going up about 10, across the board with everything, and fuel. So, going up $5 an hour is not covering much at all. And I consider myself lucky compared to growers who their costs are going up. They've got to do sustainability and all these things. They go, you need to do the sustainability thing for some of the big corporates, but we're going to drop your price $200 a tonne this year. Pretty tough.
Very tough.
And a lot of these growers don't talk about it. They won't talk about it because they're too proud to talk about it. Some of them.
So much to think about there. Does it feel like work just becomes your whole life, or are you able to get some sort of separation from it?
Yeah, it does consume us a fair bit of our time. Like, we do try and have the odd catch up where we try and not talk about work. When you do work like we do and as closely as we do, you tend to end up talking about work anyway, don't you? At some
it's interesting because we're in a wine industry, so you go, right, we're not going to talk about work, and then you go, let's catch up for dinner. What wine do you bring? What wine do you bring? Oh, remember when we built that and we bought that? And, geez, that was a good year, wasn't it? And you talk, remember that was the year we went over and we did that job. And
because it's connected to everything in your life.
It is.
Yeah.
It's life. It's life. We live it. We breathe it. Yeah. So,
what do you do to recharge though?
To recharge, my recharge drink. Yeah, I didn't think I should say that. Open another bottle of wine. We both like to get away, sort of July, August each year. So Brad goes in one direction with his family. I go in
completely opposite direction.
He tends to go to the snow, and we tend to head somewhere warm. So yeah, we generally try and take a couple of months off. Couple of weeks off. each year. That's sort of it at the moment. I'm a big believer in, now's the time to work hard, I suppose. And yeah, hopefully we'll reap those rewards, down the track. So Brad's a runner, so he likes to hit the pavement. For me, I like to, spend some time by some sort of water, an ocean somewhere warm. Yeah, with a nice sparkling in hand. So
sounds better than running to me.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about what you've managed to achieve since you took over?
Yeah, I don't know. There's days where I wake up and think, I could be doing so much more, or, what else is there that I can do? The last 3 years have been pretty challenging, obviously with COVID, and running of the cellar door, and having to pivot every time you think you're sort of under control and you've got a handle on things, something else happens. There's a new restriction, or there's another border closed, or what have you. But I think we're starting to see what the new normal is. I just completed a 10,000 word submission for the Tourism Awards, and I remember sitting there the last night going back over it and going, wow, what we're doing is pretty awesome. But it takes yourself to stop and sit down and actually read it.
Because when you're living it every day, you're not thinking of it.
You're always
like that.
questioning what you're doing. Is there something else I could be doing? Or but no, I think we're in a good place.
On the flip side, we're producing a sparkling Monty traditional method. No one had ever done it before in the world, unless some obscure little Italian fella has been hiding it away. But that's something that you go, if no one else ever does one, which I think someone else is now, but it's just different, and with guys like Nick who are wine writers, he might come up to me and go, mate, I tried that sparkling Monty. That is absolute rubbish. But at least he's talking about it. He's talking about it.
He's talking up.
I did. I said in front of 150 people at a wine show, telling everyone how good it was.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's
best sparkling Monty in the country.
But if you're talking about it, isn't that good?
No such thing as bad publicity.
And so we're doing that. We've got Fiano. A few more people are doing a bit more Fiano now. We're out to do these new clones of Pinot and Langhorne Creek, which people go, geez, that's. But it's doing those sorts of things. We're embracing trying to get Malbec to grow better. It's a bit of a challenge, so we're putting in irrigation. We're not the first. I'm not putting my hand up to say we're the first to do that, but, we're doing things like that. In our cellar door, we've got, a sparkling spritz, whatever it is, in a can.
We're always looking at ways to improve, I suppose. We don't just sit still. We don't ever think we've got to status quo and we're happy where things are happening. We're always looking for that next thing.
That's probably something that's really key to survival, isn't it?
Beyond your own business, if we made you two, the chair and CEO of all grape growing and viticulture and, vineyard businesses in the country and said, here's a blank checkbook to invest in research and development, what would you be doing on a broad, practical scale to improve viticulture in this country?
I'm a big believer in regionality. However, Brad has just said we are planting Pinot in Langhorne Creek and we'll see where that's at. I understand his reasoning and, with everything else that he's done and his foresight, I'm happy to roll with that. But I'm a big believer in regionality, and I think one of the things is we have a lot of varieties planted in a lot of regions that probably shouldn't be there. So for me,
you'd start ripping some stuff out.
Yeah, I would, or change, or changing, retopping them and what have you. Because at the end of the day, if something shouldn't be grown in a region, and you know what it's like, You're
saying that there is some great sites in, that produce some crazy good wines because it's a unique parcel.
Yeah.
But there
are always exceptions.
But why are we growing Pinot in Langhorne Creek? If you can't get it for under $3,000 a tonne in the Adelaide Hills, then there's still people that need to make, there's people out there that want to buy a $15 bottle of Pinot and smash it and cheap fizz. And, we don't all have the money that Nick has to drink, Krug and all these sorts of things.
I wish.
The reality is and people might go, why? I guarantee it'll work. No, I really, I'm not doing it. I'm doing it, and you know what? It just puts something else in there. And then if I've got a Hills company that comes to me and says, Brad, I want to buy some of that Pinot off you for Sparkle or this, I go, right, but you have to take some Shiraz, and it just opens up. We probably sell to 25, 30 different wineries, and we're 60 hectares.
Yep.
It
We
shows
do.
you we're happy to sell bits and pieces to little guys, and they're all very passionate. So that's a relationship thing. And I said, I didn't just go off a whim. I'm not going and putting Mataro in because I don't think that's for us. In the Barossa, I'm not putting everyone's talking Grenache, and Grenache is getting some good bucks. But if you put it into a $20 rosé, the numbers aren't going to work long term. And McLaren Vale and Barossa do great Grenache. We had Grenache once, and it's okay.
How, with those people that you're selling to, how closely do you follow, those wines and where your fruit goes, and you're seeing what those end users are doing with it?
Well, definitely. I've always sat there and said when I started doing the Monty, we should get everyone together, and it just got hard and trying to get. But I'd love to go right. Everyone, we have our annual Monty lunch, and you bring in the one from 2018, and you all take, and maybe the current year. We have a few guys that drop off. A few go, geez, I'm starting to struggle to sell my Monty. I'm going to wait a year, or something's happened in there. They don't have a cellar door or anything. So it does go up and down. But we all know what wine it's going into. We did sell it to Treasury for 3 years, and they didn't bottle it. It was going to go into the Rosemount Nursery series, and it sat there. And in the end, I said, I don't want to sell it to you anymore because you actually aren't doing anything good for the variety, for the Case family, or for Langhorne Creek because it's not in bottle. Oh yeah, but they're just trying to work on a market. I said, so we sold it elsewhere, and we actually sold it into it's still Treasury. I got it into Penny's one year and said, got one of their winemakers to have a look at when they were down. They're like, this is pretty amazing. Got it in there. They were really had high hopes for a cellar reserve range.
Yeah.
It ended up going back to Rosemount because we didn't supply them enough. Oh, anyway, that's another story. But it shows you what, and I got my knuckles wrapped over that, to be honest.
And I gave up my Monty. Kimbolton lost their Monty because I couldn't take it from the Rosemount.
Well, because I wanted to go and put it in there and get the one thing about certain labels,
they can push.
Well, if they said there's a Penfolds Montepulciano Cellar Reserve at $70. And they generally say this Monty would have come from Langhorne Creek and the Case family. Geez, that ticks all the boxes on what I'm doing stuff for.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen. Anyway, and as I said, but now we've got all these little guys, from A, B, and D. But Charlotte Dalton now takes it. Lady Garden's taking stuff. 5 Acre Wines. Steve Pannell takes a fair bit. Steve's I've got a lot of time for Steve.
That's what he's doing.
And if you see Langhorne Creek Montepulciano, it has come from the Case family.
Yeah.
So there is no one at the moment that's got Monty. One person.
I tell them it's too risky, and you get all this extra. You got to lift wires. Oh, we're not into that stuff.
But if you want some Zin cuttings,
Ironically, that's now Monty. It's Cabernet to Zin, cut off Monty.
Yeah.
So,
All right, we've got 3 questions that we're asking all our guests to end on. So, who makes your favourite wine in SA other than you?
Is it the greatest one of the greatest wines I've ever drunk was the Jim Barry O2 Amar, which, but I don't drink that every year because it's quite an expensive wine. But, it's sort of funny how, because I prefer champagne, but if it was going to be one wine from South Australia, Pikes Riesling's just you can't go past a Pikes traditional Riesling, just smashable, affordable, nothing ever stops you from wanting one.
You can find it in every Chinese restaurant between here and Sydney. The number of times I've been saved in a country town Chinese restaurant by
Pikes
Pikes
Riesling.
trad.
What about you, Nick?
I'm a Shardy lover, so I'd have to go the Binet range.
Ooh, someone's getting paid more than me.
You're drinking your $18 Riesling and she's drinking a $150 Chardonnay.
And ask me where I get it from, out of Brad's cellar. I can't afford it. I always invite him for dinner and tell him to bring the wine.
I'm disappointed neither of you said, hey, diddle.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Brad.
Next one, red or white?
Both. Yeah, I can't split them. Sorry.
Spritz out of a can by the sounds of it. At a rave.
And what makes the SA wine industry unlike any other?
Relationships, collaboration. That would be my thoughts.
Diversity. I mean, we've got from, even if you said Clare to Langhorne Creek's 150 odd K.
Yep.
And you go Riesling, Certico. Still listening to me there?
Yeah, you're really plugging
Come
it.
on, Peter. But I'm just saying, grow great Riesling.
Say nice
You
things
can go to
about
Eden Valley
Armour.
Riesling. You've got Shiraz in all these regions. You got Sauv Blanc, Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, Pinot, Grenache. 150 kilometres, and you can land in the middle of Adelaide and go, I like this particular grape variety. You're there within 2 hours. And I think that's pretty unique. And also the diversity of those styles as well from region to region. So, yeah, I'd like to sit there and think that come to SA, you pretty much, you can get anything you really need.
Thanks, guys.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Head to the Wine Grape Council of South Australia website for links and further resources. This is part of a bigger conversation, so feel free to share this podcast with your mates and look after yourselves. Cheers.